especially those of you listening to us in the diaspora. Welcome to another of the Opposition United Workers Party weekly press conference. Today, I have with me the leader of the opposition, the parliamentary representative for Meeku South, the Honorable Alan Chapman, and the deputy political leader of the United Workers Party, Mr. Guy Joseph. And our subject today is specifically dealing with the new proposed halls of justice, but more specifically, the new approach of government in terms of how every major government project seems to be shrouded in secrecy, the extent to which our government is practicing clandestinity, the surreptitious nature in which they go about dealing with the public when it comes to matters that are of interest and pertain directly to them. Let us not forget that at the end of the day, most of those major projects require loans on the part of the government. We are the owners of many of those assets and projects. We are the ones who will ultimately pay for them, the taxpayers of Nigeria. We have seen how so far the government has found need to engage in tax gouging. They have been taxing solutions to an extent unforeseen before. When we accumulate higher debt that is undisclosed in most cases, in some cases, not explained in some cases, we are just setting up, our government is just setting us up for even more tax gouging because ultimately, eventually, we have to repay those debts. This is a government who has broken their promises, especially the promise of being accountable and transparent. This is a government who has broken the trust betrayed the trust of the people because they have said one thing and they are in effect doing another. They are going contrary to the public's expectations. This is a government who, as I said, are operating in a clandestine manner because at the end of the day, they refuse to answer questions and to explain to the public matters that they owe the public information on. In light of this, we as an opposition, as a responsible opposition, have to be digging for information that should be forthcoming from our government. In the case of the halls of justice, Trinidadians, through their media, have more information than we in St. Lucia have from our government that we have put in office to represent us and to account to us. At the end of the day, we saw a sword turning ceremony on the 19th of April, where the ground was broken for the halls of justice, and you, the media, was excluded. A direct, definite indication of the fact that there is secrecy and that there is something to hide. Usually, when there is something being hidden, it suggests that there is something untoward. I am not in a position to make any allegations now, but I can ask questions. Why the secrecy? Why all the clandestine activity? Why the refusal to account? What is it that our government is hiding? Okay. And we know when it comes to infrastructural projects, by and large, a corrupt government finds opportunity in infrastructural projects. Hence the reason why it is absolutely incumbent on any transparent government to come out, account, and be open and liberal with information so that St. Lucians can understand and know exactly what it is they're getting into. My colleagues will speak a little more and elaborate a little more, but let's not forget, this has been the trend of the Philip Pierre SLP administration from the onset. We are left in the dark on GPH. Okay, one government minister actually went as far as saying that it is a secret deal. When asked questions on matters pertaining to the people of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister has actually indicated to the media that that is not their business. Another government minister has actually said the media should not go there and insisted that the question not be asked. We have other ministers of government who attack people when they ask questions. The Honorable Stephenson King, when questioned by the Minibus Association, we heard the answer that he gave. He attacked him. We have another minister, Richard Frederick, who has a weekly talk show, who attempts to intimidate, abuse his position of power and his access to information to intimidate and abuse citizens. That is the kind of government we have that is suggesting to us that our democracy in this country is at great risk. Our democracy is being threatened by those actions, and may I say more so, by our tacit endorsement and acceptance of those behaviors. If we do not take stock very soon, if we do not stand up and let the government know that this unacceptable behavior cannot continue, we will lose the prized possession of our freedom, our rights, our democracy in general. St. Lucians, it is a serious situation when you don't speak out. Do not think that because you're not directly affected, in some of the cases, that it is not your responsibility to speak out. Because when your turn comes, when you're going to be directly affected, by then, all the institutions of a functioning state and democracy would have been eroded, and the government would have become so autocratic that you will not have a voice. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to let it be known to the public, as they have a right to know, what it is we know so far from third parties about what it is that goes on, about what we own in this country, and what is owed to us in this country. Remember, I'm saying, the projects, in most of the cases, in all of the cases, are our projects, citizens of this country. The loan that are taken, the debts to be repaid, are going to be repaid by us, taxpayers. We are already paying exorbitant taxes. Let us be guided and guarded that we are not placed in a position where our government just go on a spree of increasing our debt and thereby increasing taxes on St. Lucians and ruining our economy. I ask the question again, and I'm hoping that my colleagues can shed a little more light as to why the secrecy? What is the secret? And why do we have to haggle with our government to account to us as they owe it to us? I would now like to call on Mr. Guy Joseph, the Deputy Political Leader, to elaborate a little more and to go in some more details. And I'm hoping that Mr. Joseph can shed some light on the halls of justice that our government seems to have shrouded in secrecy. Mr. Joseph, I hand over to you.
Good morning to everyone of the media and those following us live on social media. I'm happy to be part of this press conference this morning. And I will begin by saying, according to Morgie, when will we learn these guys are not for we? You know, I have to start with this because to have to go to the Trinidadian Guardian newspaper to get information about a sod turning ceremony and a project in St. Lucia that our government, our Prime Minister, signed a bold agreement for. And there's so much secrecy, nothing circulating in our local media, not from the government press secretary, not from the Labour Party's press secretary. But I can find more information in Trinidad than I know for sure. This guy is not for us. And so I begin, and I will give you factual information according to the article and Mr. Emil Elias, who is the lead person in this project. And I have not seen anything in any other newspaper to counter the information. So I have to take it that this information is factual. So, as my colleague, Mr. Montut, indicated, Trinidadians know more today about the halls of justice, the terms and conditions of the Hall of Justice, than St. Lucians and maybe even the St. Lucian media. NH, which is the Trinidadian company, has signed an EC $165 million deal with the government. And that is truly a deal. And as I go through the details, now I know St. Lucians don't usually like numbers, but when it comes to money, I like numbers. And I will delve into the numbers because we are the ones going to pay for it in the long run. This agreement or sword turning ceremony took place on the 19th of April. And a bolt is what we call a build. You own, you lease, and then you transfer. So I want all St. Lucians to understand. The contractor is building, but they are owning. Now the first question that pops up, can you own a building on land that is not yours? That is the question we need to ask. Now, this is not a wooden structure that you go in and build, and after a period of time you can take it and you can go with it. So, you will hear the details because, and that is he, Mr. Elias said, the government opted for a bolt because it is anxious not to increase debt to GDP. What does Mr. Elias know about running the affairs of St. Lucia? That he's saying to the Trinidadian newspaper that the government of St. Lucia is anxious not to increase the debt to GDP, so they opted for a bolt. So when you go for a bolt arrangement, you're not paying for it. So because the debt is not reflected on the books of government, because you've found a creative mechanism to only account every year for the $13+ million that you are going to pay back. And you are going to pay that in rent. And I will break it down for all St. Lucians to understand how much of a sellout this Labour Party government, led by Philip J. Pierre, is. So Mr. Elias knows that the government is anxious not to raise the debt to GDP. But we already know, according to the Social and Economic Review, that we are past the 71 or 72% debt to GDP. So if you add that 165 million, and that 165 million does not have the interest yet, we will come to the interest. And you would understand that we may be paying well over $300 million for that building. How much impact? You remember the criticism we came under for building an airport terminal that should cost about 400 million, and they said, oh, that's the biggest debt in St. Lucia? An airport terminal, and now you're building a 33,000 square feet building that might cost more than the airport terminal. But we are coming to this, so you would understand, St. Lucia, what your government is doing to you. So, because the government decide to disguise the debt, does not mean that we are not owing. We are not owing. We still have to pay. And I will give you the figure. If you took a loan to build that building, a 33,000 square feet building, at $1,000 per square foot of building, it would only cost you $33 million. and $1,000 a square foot is reasonably expensive. Imagine now, is not 33 you paying, is 165. So that is why I am baffled by the economics of the Labour Party. Because you can go and take a mortgage at 5.5% interest in the bank today. And you could build that building, any contractor in St. Lucia. But I will show you what Mr. Elias said about us in St. Lucia. So, at $1,000 a square foot, the building would cost us $33 million. Why is it costing us $165 million? The cost now is $165 million. And if I divide $165 million by 33,000, now I'm rounding off figures because I never give the media any information that is not reliable. The actual figures, they are about 33,192 square feet or thereabout. But for ease of calculation, I have rounded it off to the nearest whole number, which is 33 million, because it's just 190,000. So, 33,000. So I round it off to the near. So at 33,000 square feet, it is working out to $5,000 per square foot of building. And I want St. Lucians to understand. That is the average size of a square foot, a sheet of paper. So every piece of the building that is that size will cost St. Lucians $5,000. That's without the cost of financing. So you would understand what our government is doing to us in this country. I move on. It says that there's going to be a quarterly lease repayment rental that reflects the cost of the building. So that's the $165 million. Plus the transaction fees. We don't know what the lawyer's fees are yet. We don't know what the bank fees, the transaction fees. And bridging interest cost. So the $165 million does not have these three other components. So will it go up to 200? Will it go up to 300? So at the $165 million on a 12-year lease to own, you are going to be paying $13,750,000 a year. And if you divide that by monthly payments, you would be paying $34.72 per square foot. Rental. Let me remind all St. Lucians, the Dyer Mall, the Bois d'Orange Plaza, the arrangement entered into by the Alan Chasney-led administration is $4.50 a square foot for 15 years, and after the 15 years, the two top floors will belong to the people of St. Lucia. Make a comparison between this and what we are getting for the halls of justice, which begins. Now, if we were going to pay $34 a square foot, maybe I would say we would get off the hook. Although the highest rental government is paying is about $7, $8 a square foot. But that is already maybe 4 times higher than the highest rental. But that does not have the interest component. So I want you to understand. St. Jude at $170 million, 220,000 square feet, worked out to less than $800 a square foot. And we got heavily criticized for that. Today, we are going to build a building in Castries at $5,000 $100,000 a square foot. We found, and if you add the cost of the loan, I will give you the cost of the loan at an average interest rate. So there was a sod turning ceremony, but yet still, according to Mr. Elias, they are not close to being ready, but the Prime Minister wants them to start almost immediately, so they were looking at 60 days to start. And he gave a number of things that are not in place. I don't even think the designs have been submitted to DCA. I don't know. He didn't give this detail. So, here's what he says. The land to be leased. Now, I want to understand how you're going to lease the land. But here's what it says. And it says, lease agreement is to be put in the security package. So, if you are leasing a piece of land from me, you are using it as security to go to the bank to get a loan. You have to own that land for you to be able. How can you go with a piece of land? So you can go and take a loan on a piece of land you leasing, and if you don't pay the loan, who is losing out? You see the arrangements that the Philip J. Pierre administration. So if I'm leasing from you a house, I can go and take a loan on the house. Or if I go and rent a car from one of the car rental companies for 3 months, I can go to the bank and say, well, look, I have a 3 months or I have a 1 year lease on this car. Can I get a loan on it? Because that appears to me to be what the government is saying to us. Because I'm not the one who said it. Mr. Elias said the lease agreement is going to be used as security, not the bolt agreement. The lease agreement for the land will be used as collateral for the loan. Am I to understand that the land in Castries, that 33,000 square feet of land, is valued at $165 million? And if it is valued at $165 million, because if that's what you're using for security, then why is the Banan land worth only $27 a square foot? These are questions for us to ponder. Also, my information on this says that Mr. John Peters is one of the 3 directors of the company that is established to form the special purpose vehicle in which the land is to be transferred to or leased to, along with 2 other Trinidadians. So you mean there were no solutions that the government could have offered to undertake this project? Another ripoff by another Trinidadian company. Security for the syndicated lenders, his company will contribute, but he never said how much NH will contribute. If it's $1 million, if it's $2 million, if it's $5 million. So what is NH's contribution? We don't know. No indication of the rate of interest. Now, if I go based on the last agreement that the government entered in the bond market of 7.5%, let us assume that they go at 8% interest rate. That is $13,200,000 interest per year on $165 million loan. For the 12 years, you are going to pay $158,400,000 in interest. And you add that to the $165 million, which is the cost of the project, and we add $323,400,000. You know what that would take the monthly interest to pay back, or the monthly rental? $67 a square foot to rent this building for 12 years. Compare that to $4.50 at the Dyer Mall, and after 15 years, it belongs to the government of St. Lucia. And the government is already paying the loan. They are paying the money on the Dyer Mall, but the building remains empty while government is going out to rent from other persons. So, St. Lucian, you have to ask yourself, will that drive the price of rental up for everybody in the city? Because if government is going to give a long-term rental for $60+ a square foot per month, not per year, per month, then where does that leave us? The other St. Lucians who are doing business in Castries. And why wouldn't the government rent from locals at that price, but would allow a Trinidadian company to come in there and make that kind of return on the people of St. Lucia? Now, I believe once again the people of St. Lucia have been shafted by the government that they elected. I will also tell you what Mr. Elias said. And I want to appeal to the supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party and two former prime ministers who sit in the parliament on this same side. Honorable Stephenson King and Honorable Kenny Anthony. Two former prime ministers will sit on the same side of a government and allow that to be done to the people of St. Lucia. And there's not a single voice out there other than the voice of the leader of the opposition and the opposition party to say that what is being done is unjust, that it is not right to abuse a country's resources in that manner and the mandate. And I am telling you, this project is a project with the highest level of corruption that I have seen in St. Lucia. There's nothing that can justify it. No wonder the sword turning was done in secrecy, right in the middle of Castro. Here's what it says, the construction, here's what Mr. Elias said in Trinidad. The construction of the halls of justice is a great opportunity for manufacturers in Trinidad, not in St. Lucia. That it is because when we go offshore, we use resources from Trinidad. You heard what Mr. Elias said? When they go offshore as a Trinidadian company. So what's in it for St. Lucians who have to pay the bill at the end of the day? Our tax money is what is going to pay this. And Mr. Elias can say boldly that wherever he goes, it is Trinidadians who benefit from it, not St. Lucian. Well, Mr. Elias should be working in Trinidad so Trinidadians can benefit. When he works in St. Lucia, St. Lucians should benefit. I will go on to say, because he was specific, for Trinidad and Tobago, such as PVC pipes, subcontractors, most of the equipment will have to be brought in. And here's what he said. And note, we might use some equipment from St. Lucia for the foundation. We might. He's not even saying they will guarantee some St. Lucian. Does that remind you of anything? Just drive down the West Coast Road and see what Namalco has. See the amount of trucks and equipment. And all St. Lucians can be is an operator and a driver. while their trucks and their equipment are packed with grass growing on the tires. This is what this SLP government is doing to the people of St. Lucia. A government that said they would put you first. You are below last. If there's something that is below being last, that is where we are under this government. So the West Coast Road is being done by another Trinidadian company. And I've spoken to some of the subcontractors they engage in St. Lucia. They were underpaying them, so that they gave up the job in order to bring subcontractors from Trinidad and paying them the proper price. And the St. Lucian workers left the local contractors and went to work with the Trinidadian contractor. There's nobody looking out for the people of St. Lucia under this government. And then Mr. Elias says he guarantees there'll be no cost overrun because it's a bull. Now the cost is running over already. How can you have cost overrun? $5,000 a square foot. And you want to talk about, well, there'll be no cost overrun? But the cost overruns is already 1,000% above what it should be. So you built in your cost overruns because I said at $1,000 a square foot, the building would cost $33 million. So if you at 165 plus the interest rate and all the other costs, which is taking it to $300 plus million, 33 by 10 is 330. So you may be over 1,000% in cost overruns already. And you're going to put on the paper in Trinidad, well, you guarantee us there's going to be no cost overrun. I'm telling you, the cost of this project is filled and running over. So I want Mr. Elias to understand, and the people in Trinidad who are going to come here to work, and I'm sending this message to this government. If the Prime Minister is a dunce to accept this, we are not stupid in this country. I think I have enough basic common sense to know when something is good for me and when it is not good. And my political leader will speak, but I believe we have to make arrangements. And we have to let the contractor, the developer, the bank, and everybody else know that when the government changes, we are going to revisit these arrangements. There's no way a UWP government will be paying $60+ a square foot for rental. And I'm going to sound one note of caution about the location. Next to the cathedral. Are you going to be driving piles? And if you drive piles, the vibration, what will it do to the buildings of the city? What will it do to that special monument of the cathedral? And we have seen the repairs that had to be done to the cathedral. So can you imagine driving piles a few yards away from the building? The CDC buildings, is that another way to say to all the residents of the CDC, you have to vacate because there's a likelihood that the vibration will collapse? And I'm saying the final thing to St. Lucians on this. You cannot have a hall of justice in the middle of town that can be traffic locked. If you move in a high-profile prisoner to come to court, given the sophistication of crime today, why would you have to drive through and say, are they going to close off the city when there are high-profile cases? Because remember, you are building a building that is going to be there for the next 50 years. That means that if we are still around, it would be in 2074. That building will still be in use. Can you imagine the level of sophistication of criminal activity and everything that would be happening? So, St. Lucians, we are not just here because we are an opposition. We are here because an injustice is being done. That the government is once again betraying the trust of the people of St. Lucia. And like GPH, they have sold us out again to another foreign company. St. Lucians, how much of that are you willing to stomach? And I end how I started. It is time we understand these guys, not for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph. As you just heard, Mr. Joseph spoke in detail, as we would have expected our government to do, of the injustice being caused by the halls of justice. I would like to call on our political leader, leader of the opposition, and the member in parliament for Miku South to go into some more details, additional details, and I'm hoping, quite apart from the halls of justice, we will highlight some of the other projects where there are some serious concerns as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montoute, Mr. Joseph, members of the media, my fellow St. Lucians. I just want to continue very quickly with where Mr. Joseph left off. The same article in The Guardian, the concluding part, I'm going to quote it directly. It said, asked whether there had been any pushback from the opposition in St. Lucia with regard to the award of the bolt to a TNT company. Elias said, and I quote, none so far. But I may say, if there is pushback on the political side, it would not be that the government of St. Lucia has used a highly qualified firm to do it. There are no construction or financing resources within St. Lucia to carry out this size of bolt. Repeat that again. There are no construction or financing resources within St. Lucia to carry out this size bolt. It's an interesting question. I would wonder how he knows that if in fact it never went out to bid. So in fact, the truth of that statement is that no St. Lucian company was given the opportunity to do that. We saw a local company, local bank, recently give an $80 million loan to NLA. We hear that Bank of St. Lucia is going to be providing the financing for GPH. We don't know what collateral they're going to use. That's for another story. We saw that St. Lucian banks and regional banks got together to finance the airport project. So how can he say that that financing is not available? The same Daher Mall. The same NH did that. And the decision was made by the owner and the developer of the Daher Mall to choose NH. He's free to have done. But the Daher Mall, the upstairs part, is 77,000 square feet. Is twice the size. So how can NH come and now want to charge the government $5,000 a square foot? Joseph was being generous. Most of the buildings that when I called around that have been built in Cass Street have not exceeded $500 a square foot. $500 a square foot. And this one is $5,000. 10 times the amount. I want to say that there's a term that is coming up repeatedly, and that's the term called fraud. What's fraud? The dictionary defines it as wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. Some people will say that fraud is the intention to deceive others. The intention to deliberately deceive. And then you can go on. To whose gain? Why are they trying to deceive? And I say that because we are seeing a pattern of behavior in this country, and particularly from this government, that one can describe as fraudulent. Is this something new? Look at Ernest Hilaire. What he did when he was the High Commissioner can only be described as fraud. That he used his position to deceive. Who gave him permission to put the car in the state's name? He said the car belonged to him. So when he was a High Commissioner, who gave him the authority to put the car in the state's name? And after the car was put in the state's name, who gave the staff the authority to drive the car and to put it into his personal container? Who? The laws in St. Lucia, the Financial Act is very clear. Permission must be given by the Director of Finance. We saw that an account was opened up with Jafali. The Auditor General did a report. The Auditor General confirmed that no permission was asked by the High Commission, and in particular by the High Commissioner, for permission to open up an account. The Auditor General went on and specifically said that £66,500 was put into the account. The Accountant General was never advised. The Director of Finance was never advised. No documentation has been provided as to why that money was put into the account. And that there were insufficient details as to how that money was spent. But we do know, according to the Accountant General, that some of that money was transferred into Ernest Hilaire's personal account. I bring it up because it's an important question. You have to ask, why? Why was that done? If it was his car all along, why would he have put it in the name of the state? If an account was being opened up with Dr. Jafali and the money was to benefit the people of St. Lucia, why the secrecy? And when we look at the word fraud, it says that somebody attempts to deceive because there is going to be personal gain. So was there personal gain? What's the result? The result is that when he got the car, he was able to get the car and pay 12.5% less for the car than he would have if he didn't put it in the state's name. Repeat that again. He saved 12.5% on the cost of the car. The money that went into his account, I don't know. Did he benefit? I don't know. Can't answer that question. So there's a pattern here that we're seeing. GPH. What do we know? We know that the government currently earns $6.50 US per passenger. We know in 2019 we had almost 800,000 passengers. And we were well on our way to exceed 1 million. In fact, GPH, in their press statement, and to what Minister Joseph said, the Financial Times, who gave a report on this story, said that GPH said that they're expecting that within the short to medium term that they will exceed 1 million passengers. As I said to you, as Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and involved in the negotiations with the cruise industry, I knew the cruise industry was willing to increase the head tax to St. Lucia. So, it's not far-fetched to say 1 million passengers at $10 US. That's $10 million US a year. And if they exercise the extension to 40 years, 10 million US dollars a year for 40 years is 400 million US dollars. That's the equivalent of over $1 billion EC dollars. And that is only on the revenue that they're going to generate from the tax. Remember, GPH is also getting the concession for the vendors. They're getting the concession for the taxi drivers. That means the money that the taxi drivers were paying, the money that the vendors were paying, and these new sites, anybody who's going to use those sites are now going to pay GPH a fee. Not even including that revenue. So when the government of St. Lucia, without a bid, hands over the concession, the rights to the revenue, to GPH, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what did St. Lucia get? What did we get? They said, well, they took over the loan. Okay, how was St. Lucia paying for the loan previously? SLASPA was paying for the loan out of the $6.50 US that they were getting from each passenger. And not only were they paying for the loan, but they had money left over. They said, no, well, they're going to do now development work of 40 million US dollars. How are you going to pay for that? You're going to pay for it out of the money that they're earning. So now they're going to be getting the $10, the 10 million US dollars a year. 10 million US dollars a year. So think of it for a moment. If they're going to do $30 million of work, it would take 3 years to pay for it. Said, okay, well, maybe the work that they're going to do is so special that only GPH can do it. Who built Point Seraphin? Invest St. Lucia. Who built and expanded the dock in front of Point Seraphin? SLASPA. So the project that they're proposing of expanding the berth, SLASPA has already done that. In fixing up the vendor stalls, Invest St. Lucia has already done that. Is there something new? Is there some special technique that we can't do for ourselves? Who is determining how much extra money that they're getting? And where is this money going? So we have to ask ourselves the question, why is the government doing this deal? Well, there's nothing special that the company is doing. We could have negotiated with the cruise ships. We can build all the stuff ourselves. So the question is why? We're then forced to ask ourselves another question. Who is benefiting? So you're taking money that was going into an entity called SLASPA. The chairman of SLASPA is whom? The director of finance. The deputy chairman of SLASPA is whom? The permanent secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure. Representative from the Attorney General's office and representatives from the private sector sit on the board. They publish every year their account. Everybody knows who's employed, how they get employed at SLASPA. Everybody knows how much money they're making. And we know what's in SLASPA's bank account as citizens of this country. You're now going to take the money and put it into another entity of which we know nothing. Public company. Where's the money going? Now, if I have to judge by the early actions, and we all have to do that, to become suspicious of all the people in St. Lucia to have hired as the managing director of GPH in St. Lucia. It happened to be, by chance, the brother of the person who is the chairman of Invest St. Lucia, and who is also a deputy in the Bank of St. Lucia, that have said that they're going to provide the funding for this project, of which we don't know what the collateral is. Because GPH doesn't own the land. So what are they using as collateral? Does it mean the government is intending to come back to Parliament now to seek a guarantee? So after giving them all of this money, they can't even raise the money to bring here to St. Lucia? And again, I want to say to St. Lucians, when people provide you with excuses and not answers, you must become even more suspicious. So they're very quick to say to you, oh, look what Chastney did with DSH. And he leased the land for $1. Okay. We leased the land for the $1 because DSH agreed to build a horse racing track. They built it, $30 million US. They agreed to operate it. We did not participate in that. So if they lost money, they covered the losses. So we said here was a piece of land that was not being used. There was nothing on the land. All we did was put the land in as a lease so they could build on it. Let's look at the difference. The port has been an ongoing project for how many years? An ongoing business. There's a track record. We know how much money they've been collecting. SLASPA has not lost money. SLASPA makes money every year. And here the next set of foolishness. They want to tell us, that the revenue from SLASPA, the revenue, only amounts to 10 or 11% of SLASPA's revenue. But what they're not telling you is that it is almost 30% of SLASPA's profit. Because the cost of running the port is very efficient. So you're going to take away 30% of SLASPA's profitability. So we've already seen the beginning. One of the people that was hired at GPH was a person that was employed at SLASPA. The same person who sat at the table and negotiated the deal on behalf of the people of St. Lucia. Within days of the agreement being finalized, was hired by GPH to come and work for them. Nobody has a problem with that. When he was sitting there negotiating, did he know that he was going to get the job? Nobody wants to ask that question. Who is the lawyer for GPH? Thaddeus Antoine. How convenient. Who is doing the public relations for GPH? Were any of these things put out to bid? And that's what I want. And that's the pattern of behavior that we're seeing in St. Lucia, where the government is taking government resources, government revenue, putting it in the hands of third parties, people who are not part of the government, who are not responsible and accountable to the people or the director of finance of this country, that they get to make the decisions by themselves. In the same deal that Mr. Joseph was talking about with the Halls of Justice, all these fancy numbers. But at the end of the day, how is the Bolt arrangement going to be paid for? It's going to be paid because there will be a lease agreement, a rental agreement, between the Ministry of Justice and the company. That's how it's paid. Taxpayers' money. You're going to pay it in the form of rent. And as he said, the rent is going to be $34 a square foot when you, not including the finances, and could go as high as $60 or $54 a square foot. That's absurd. The highest rent we're paying in the country today is $8.50. If you were to believe the government when they were in opposition, the Daher Mall was the worst deal ever. I mean, I heard the same Ernest Hilaire saying that the highest rent that we have to pay at $4.50. So if rent at $4.50 is high, what is rent at $54? More than 10 times? More than 10 times? Let's go on. CIP. In CIP, we have what's called the donation program. $100,000 to get citizenship in St. Lucia. $100,000 is given to the CIP agency. The CIP agency transfers the money into the economic fund. I have concerns because the economic fund is being operated like a slush fund. But at least the fund is in St. Lucia. At least the fund is in St. Lucia. So the government now has come up with this genius program that they have not even taken the time to explain to St. Lucian. They've taken everyone for granted. They've disrespected the intelligence of St. Lucian. They've done a better job of explaining outside of St. Lucia what this infrastructure project is. But here's what we've been able to find out. That a company has been appointed as the investor. That company has an escrow account in China. So instead of the $100,000 coming into the CIP, the $100,000 is going into the escrow account in China. And that company now is going to pay for infrastructural projects in St. Lucia. So instead of the Ministry of Infrastructure selecting companies to build the roads, this company now, with its escrow account outside of St. Lucia, is going to make the decision. A faceless company. Who knows them? You know where they're going to find them? Are they going to follow the procurement guidelines of St. Lucia? Are they going to put the projects out to bid? How many projects are they going to do? And here's what has happened in the other islands that have done these kinds of projects. The money has not come into their countries, into their consolidated funds. The money has stayed outside of the country. And there are claims that for every $4 that the company collects, $1 is spent in the country. Let me put that in perspective. If the project costs $10 million, the company who is selling the citizenship for this infrastructural project, is going to make $40 million in order to pay for a $10 million project. Where does the $30 million go? Who's controlling it? Who's the lawyer for this company? Who's the contractor? So you see, first of all, I must ask why. If you have a system in where you're collecting the $100,000 and there's full transparency and the money is going into an account in St. Lucia, if you want to do housing, if you want to do infrastructural projects, what was preventing you from using that money to do it? Because we're in support of that. But you see, again, it's the excuse. The excuse is that the opposition is against the development of the country, is not in favor of housing, is not in favor of infrastructure. Where? Nobody's ever said that from the opposition. What the opposition said is there's no transparency, there's no accountability, and that the monies are not coming into St. Lucia. We don't know who is getting the money. We don't know how much the project is going to cost. We don't know how much money is being earned. That's what we're asking. We're asking for accountability and transparency. What does fraud say? The intention to deceive others in order for somebody to benefit. So when a person is trying to deceive, you have to ask the question, why? Why are you trying to deceive? Why are you making it difficult to know this information? Why? And to know whether it's fraud or not, you have to ask yourself, who's benefiting? NLA. The government had an opportunity to solve or rectify or cure the problem that the first time when they came to the house. We wrote a letter. We've asked if you were going to give a government guarantee to the NLA, at least put a condition to the guarantee that the NLA has to use the same procurement guidelines as the state. Otherwise, what it looks like is the government has intentionally put the money into the NLA so that the NLA board can decide who is going to get the contracts. Is that not deception? The question is why? Has the NLA taken any opportunity to tell us what the procurement guidelines are? Are they putting out to tender? How did they select who they selected? How did they decide how much money was it costing? Do we know any of the projects? We know the Darren Sammy Stadium. We know Grosley. We know Mindu Phillip Park. What else do you know? Do we know who the contractors are? Do you know how much money the contracts are for? Do we know how much money the $80 million has been spent? Who selected the NLA board? Do we know? There's an act. NLA board is not like SLASPA, where SLASPA has specifically in the act who the board members are going to be. The NLA board is selected by cabinet. So here it is, cabinet selects the board. Cabinet puts the money in. The board is making all the decisions. $80 million. $80 million. St. Jude's. The government and opposition said that my government should have never tried to build a new building. They said all we needed was some chemical and some paint, and we could have opened up the old hospital in 3 months. They came into office after the decision was made to build a new hospital. A building specifically designed, professionally designed to be a hospital. And they're their own board now, selected by them. They paid no money to those board members. They just hand-selected the people. And today, here it is, 3 years later, There's been a contractor at the site. We don't know who the contractor is. We believe we know. We think it's Renault Gajada. We don't know where the workers are coming from. We understand they're coming from India. We don't know how much money has been spent. We've heard the number $30 to $60 million. We don't get any pictures. Have we seen 3 years later the designs for the new hospital in the old building? We understand now through the budget, the recent budget, that the government is intending to spend $265 million on completing the old building. Isn't that a revelation? Stephenson King and Kenny Anthony spent $140 million. My government spent $140 million. That's $280 million over a 10-year period. And this government is telling us that they're going to spend $265 million, cannot show us a drawing, and they're going to spend all this money in the next year and have the hospital open. What is fraud? The intention of deceiving. And then we must ask ourselves, who's benefiting? No tendering has been done. None. I can tell you, whether it is St. Jude's, whether it's GPH, whether it's the halls of justice, whether it's the NLA, whether it's CIP, whether it's the Bonanza land, I can tell you who's losing. I can tell you who's losing. The people of St. Lucia are losing. The taxpayers of this country are losing. And I want to repeat something that Spider Montoot said. Our democracy is losing. And what is democracy? Democracy is a government by the people, for the people. What's the opposite of democracy? It's an autocracy, where we no longer have our rights. And I want to reiterate what he said, because he was so right. That when we as citizens of this country allow our democracy to be undermined, when we remain silent, what are we doing? We're creating an autocracy. We're telling the government, you know what? You make whatever decisions. And there are people who I know who remain silent because they're getting a benefit. And I'm not depriving anybody from getting a benefit, but I want to say to those persons, and some of them are my friends, that today that may work for you. But if we allow our democracy to be ruined, we don't have a judiciary system, if we don't follow the rule of the law, someday you may fall out of favor with those persons that are making those decisions. And if they take your land, they take away your contract, if they take away your job, who are you going to turn to complain to? That's what is at stake. Every government is entitled to make whatever discretionary decisions that they want. I'll always support that. But when they are making those discretionary decisions at the expense of our democracy, when they're using victimization and intimidation, or they're using incentives to cause people to turn a blind eye, we are in trouble in this country. And we are in trouble. Our democracy is being undermined. The resources of this state are being squandered, and there is very clear fraudulent behavior. There are deliberate intentions to deceive the people of this country as to what is really happening. And to determine whether it's criminal fraud, we must ask the question, who is benefiting? We must determine for ourselves, are those persons benefiting because they're the best person for the job? Or there was personal favor? And I would say to you that when I look at these projects and I see who's benefiting, it's questionable. But we all have eyes. We all have ears. We know who's getting the contract. We may not want to repeat it. We all know who. So we will continue as an opposition to hold this government accountable to our democracy. That's what United Workers' Party believes. It believes in the individual rights of people. We believe in accountability. And I challenge anyone. There's a lot of misinformation that's been provided about my administration and what its intentions were, but I've not run anywhere. I'm open to any level of scrutiny and accountability. There's been an appointment right now of a special prosecutor. We've heard nothing. I'm very concerned with what's going on in the DPP. I don't know how true it is, but I've heard publicly and privately that the resources to the DPP's office have been cut. Staffing problems, air quality problems, equipment problems, intimidation. Now, when you have a position like the DPP's position that is a protected position constitutionally, and even that is coming under fire, then who are we as individual citizens in this country? This government does not respect the values of democracy. And so, St. Lucians, this is not about just mépris. This isn't about just wanting to criticize for criticized sake. Our democracy is truly under fire. There is fraudulent behavior that's taking place, and we need to put a stop to it. And unless we stand up and say that democracy matters, that the checks and balances in the system to preserve a democracy are important, and we understand the importance of them, we're not going to succeed. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. And again, I'm going to hand you back over to Mr. Montoute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Alan Chasney. Ladies and gentlemen, we went into details on what is happening as far as projects are concerned in this country, the clandestine manner in which our government is operating, the surreptitious behavior, the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency. What we have here now, an undermining of our democracy, a betrayal of the trust of the people of St. Lucia, broken promises. This is what obtains today. I want to call on all St. Lucians to recognize that the erosion of our democracy is rapidly in motion, and that we must take a stand to put it to an end. We must speak out and we must stand up. And so at this point, I'm going to invite questions from the media. And you, as usual, indicate what your media house is and direct your question either at Mr. Guy Joseph or the Honorable Alan Chasney. Any questions? Okay, I imagine the discussion was so thorough that there are no questions. Unfortunately, in the case of our government, the information is so skimpy that there are many questions, but unfortunately, the government is refusing to answer your question. I want to say to the media that your role in this democracy is being undermined, your questions are not being answered. You are not getting invitations to functions of national interest for you to portray to the public exactly what is taking place. And the rest of us, as a result, are in the dark. I want to encourage the opposition to continue, even if you have to go to Trinidad to get the information. But I do appreciate the role that you are playing in bringing the truth to the fore for the benefit of St. Lucians and highlighting the dishonesty, the betrayal, and the clandestine behavior of our government. At this point, I want to thank all of you from the media who are here today covering this press conference. I want to thank all of you who are viewing and listening online. I also want to thank, as usual, our viewers and listeners from the diaspora. And let me just take this opportunity to quickly mention that on the 19th, we have a major event taking place as part of the United Workers' Party's 60th anniversary celebration. And it's going to start with a church service, and then we'll have a grand family day. You can contact the Secretariat or any member of the United Workers' Party for more details. So once again, thank you, and we look forward to you joining us on the round table on Thursday night and for the next press conference next week. Thank you.